Hi, I'm Dr. Neil Thompson, chiropractor at Align for Life, the Isle of Man's Family Wellness Clinic. This is now week 3 of our Wellness Wednesday top tips, and today is going to be all about wheat and dairy and the dangers of consuming too much of that. In fact, in all honesty, we want to try and eliminate as much of it as possible. And let me explain why. For too long now, it's probably been a staple food for most Westerners, and it creates several problems. And we'll start with wheat. Wheat, unfortunately, is packed full of gluten, as probably a lot of people are now aware of, where there's this gluten-free everything now on so many different products. Generally speaking, what you've got to understand about gluten is essentially it's a toxin to your body. And what gluten will do is it'll tend to cause a lot of inflammation in your bowel. And when there's inflammation in the bowel, that can create a lot of problems with things like constipation, even diarrhea, IBS, and in general just poor digestive problems. And often people can end up in a situation where there's a lot of gas, there's a lot of bloating, or they just feel just bunged up. And some people will notice that they are very tired when they're on gluten. They just can't really understand why. And you'll notice that when the gluten levels are substantially reduced in our diet, our energy goes up. The gluten nowadays is much more prevalent than it used to be, because the bread, which, let's be honest, most people are getting their gluten from bread, but also any wheat-based product typically will have gluten in it, and even some barley and some of the other cereals and grains as well. But wheat tends to be the one that has the most in it, and it's because the wheat nowadays that we farm is a short grain wheat. And short grain wheat unfortunately has very large amounts of gluten, much more so than, say, the wheat they grew 2,000 years ago in the biblical times. And this short grain wheat is being specifically cultivated because it's drought resistant, pesticide resistant, so farmers get a really good yield from their wheat. But unfortunately, it's a wheat that has huge concentrations of gluten compared to some of the older versions of wheat. So top tip really is to reduce the amount of wheat, which will in turn then reduce the amount of gluten, and that's going to really increase energy levels and improve bowel function tremendously. Next one is dairy. The problem we have with dairy is it's almost impossible to buy unpasteurized dairy now, because it just doesn't have any shelf life, and then obviously governments and things are worried about potential infection of the milk, which is totally understandable. But the problem is that when you pasteurize milk, you superheat it, it denatures the proteins, and that then actually configures those proteins into something that your body cannot even recognize, so it mounts an immunological response to it. And often that can result in allergies, sinus problems, and even autoimmune issues long term when we're chronically exposed to it. So often people will notice that their kids have constant runny noses and allergy issues and sinus issues if they're on dairy. Get rid of the dairy and you'll be amazed at how all those sinus allergy issues and even autoimmune problems can really be helped. The other problem with dairy is, contrary to what a lot of people think, it's not actually a good source of calcium, because the calcium in milk is not in a bioavailable form for humans to digest and absorb. Yes, there is a lot of calcium in milk, but it's not in a form that you can easily utilize. There are much better sources of calcium, things like dark green vegetables. That's really what we should be focusing in on, and limit the amount of milk that we're getting. And remember, cow's milk is for cows, it's not for humans. So that's my top tip for Wellness Wednesday today. And next week we're going to talk about don't be so quick to put on that sunscreen, and we'll find out why that's so important and the importance of vitamin D3 and your immune system. Take care. Bye for now.